Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to make money on the internet. I am your host, Bcheck. I'm joined by my legendary co-host, Legendary, and as a special guest today, we are delighted to have up with us Next is a former semi-pro CSGO player, gamer and streamer, member of Wolvesdale, aka the gaming chief cabal and partner at GG Chronicles. And he even moved his workout to join us today. Cannot wait to get into a bigger discussion on Web3 gaming versus other ETH NFTs and why there's so much value accruing to that ecosystem in just a little bit. But before we get there, just a reminder, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. This modern market is exceptionally risky. We do not know anything for sure. So please do proceed with caution and exercise your own judgment. With that out of the way, Legendary, how are you doing this Friday, the 12th of January?
GM, man, it's good to be back at my desk, not sit in a hotel room. It's good to be back using the Ledger. I mean, I had Ledger with me, but the Grid Plus, having access to all of my wallets, not having to travel a lot around with Ledger, Solana Saga, and all the other things that I have to constantly worry about. Are they charged? Are they working? It's just good to be back in a productive and basic working environment.
This is the alpha. Don't go anywhere is the alpha. If you want to move, you want to go on holiday, you want to have a break, stop that line of thinking immediately. You're just going to make your life difficult. Next, welcome to the stage with us. Really appreciate you being here with us. What's your thought on that?
GM. My thoughts on that. Thanks for having me beforehand, but my thoughts are when I travel, I just send money to my burner and just take it with me, right? I couldn't be bothered taking all the ledgers. I'm just like imagining waking up and just someone just stealing my ledgers from my apartment or so. So like, nah, you know. But yeah, happy to be here.
So
you should have seen me in Qatar. First day I got there, obviously got myself an eSIM, so I have mobile internet. Then we explored the city a bit, and on the second day, the Solana Saga got airdropped the Saga Monkeys, that collection that was trending, and the airdrop was proceeding rather slowly. So we were supposed to go to a mall. I took my Solana Saga with me, had my mobile hotspot set up, and was like constantly checking: did I get it? What's the floor price? Is it pumping? Is it dumping? What should I do? And I was like, okay, this is insane. I'm just gonna dump it the minute I get it. So I stopped worrying about it and I stopped thinking about it because it felt honestly a bit ridiculous what I was doing.
that's pretty insane. And look, ultimately, Legendary, you made the wrong decision by dumping it, which goes back to the conclusion that you just said, which is don't go anywhere. You made that bad decision because you decided to go to Qatar and take a break and go to a mall. Like, what are you doing in a mall? What are you thinking?
Trading NFTs. What else would you do in a mall?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Like you'd gone out to get away from stuff, but you still couldn't get away from it. Next, so you said when you go away, your strategy is like, do you ever switch off then from the game? Like if you're kind of taking stuff with you, do you feel like no, I can't quite switch off ever? Are you like always on in that respect?
You're always on. Yeah, I think that's just part of it, right? Whenever you travel, I think even when I traveled last year to NYC, it was just like there was one mint going on and I didn't have my ledger. That was one time where I missed out. I had no money on burner, like first time traveling, right? And they were all minting some stuff that you needed ETH for, and I didn't. I just had phone, and like I couldn't mint over the phone because it was unmintable on the phone. I was like, well, that's my mistake, and I can learn from. But no, you cannot switch off. Never, to be honest.
Exactly. I think that's one of the, well, it's both a difficulty, but also one of the benefits, I think, of working in a space that you actually like. Like, I think if we didn't like it, we probably wouldn't be able to never switch off. So I don't know. It's both a positive and a negative. It's a double-edged sword. But let's get into the show today. We're going to hit all of the headlines, get you up to speed with everything that's happened in the past 24 hours in the NFT market, a little bit of crypto ETF stuff too, because we want to touch on it. Although I feel like we might be dead in the water there, being a bit fatigued by it all. And then we're going to get into the gaming stuff. Got a very interesting discussion. That's why we've got Next up with us today. I hope we're really interested to see what the hell's going on in the gaming, why that value is accruing there so heavily versus a lot of ETH NFTs, which have been bleeding. So let's get into it. As always, this information comes from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you find that it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. So let's get into it, starting with the price action. We've got Bitcoin up 1% at 46.1K. We've got ETH flat at 2.6K. Solana's up a few percent at $98, ape at 1.5. NFT volume on ETH was at 16.9 million. Solana 8.9, Bitcoin 16.1. Some of the headlines: we had more than $4 billion in volume for the first BTC ETF day. I think Legendary might have suggested it could have been more, but we'll get a quick summary from him in just a moment. Number two, one wallet buys 18 squiggles for 151 ETH and 13 punks for 731 ETH. Seems like there's a bit of a run on the top tier collections on ETH. Definitely want to discuss what's going on there, especially since a lot of the other ETH NFTs have been bleeding. And finally, big news on the ordinal side: 600 shadow hats by Forgotten Runes sold for 0.2 BTC each for a total of $5.5 million. Huge shout out to the Forgotten Runes team. Great raise by them. We'll just touch on that briefly too. Getting into the price action on the NFTs, got CryptoPunks up 10% at about 58 ETH after that sweep. Bored Apes at 23 ETH. Mutants having a very bad time of it. A lot of underwater loans on the lending side, seeing them down 8% at 3.9 ETH. D-Gods at 2.7, Captains at 4, Azuki down 7% as well at 6.4. Penguins still pretty strong at 10.9. Moonbirds down a few percent at 1 ETH, and Noun's winning bid was at 8.2 ETH. Few notable sales: CryptoPunk Rosy Cheeks at 72 ETH, and a nice Fidenza selling for 59.9 ETH. That's $157,000. That's the price action. Those are the headlines. Legendary, any numbers catching your eye there to start us off?
Definitely the Pudgy Penguins kind of standing out in that sea of red and managing to hold well above that magical 10 ETH barrier. It's pretty impressive.
That's a really good point. What are you putting that down to? Because if you look at the rest of that market, apart from CryptoPunks, which is obviously has just run aggressively because some buyer just has decided to sweep a whole load, what are you attributing that strength in the Penguins to?
I think that they're just a bit further in their storyline in terms of the announcements that they had in Miami, in terms of building the gaming world, in terms of having that going on ZK Sync and people also preparing for that airdrop. Whereas, for example, with Azuki, we are a couple steps behind. We do not really have those official announcements yet, or at least not to that extent in terms of detail. So I just think that they've been doing very, very well for a long time, obviously with the toy line that they've been building, but more so with the excitement around the gaming world. They really nailed it down in December in Miami and just managed to keep that momentum going for a while and have certainly formed a very strong community by then.
Yeah, I'm thinking... I'll just say this, and I have no particular inside information, or I don't know anything about it for sure. I just think they've got to have, given the way all the projects are moving right now, I just think they're going to have a token. Like, it doesn't matter to me what anyone says, that it doesn't make sense, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter to me anymore. In my mind, I've decided that that's what I think is going to be. I think the strength in the token must be, at least in some respect, attributed to people feeling like that's going to come down the line. I can't see how there can be such a strong sell-off across the board and that not affect them if in the absence of some huge windfall coming down the line. And again, I don't know if that's true. That's just my instinctive thought, and I want to put it out there because I hopefully want to be right at some point in time. I want to hear one thing from me in addition to that. Then I want to come to Next to see if there's any numbers out of all of those collections or sales that's sticking out. Would also love to throw to Sam in just a moment to kind of just get a sense of all of these numbers and what's catching his attention, because feels like there's a lot going on. A lot of things are moving down quite aggressively. A lot of things are moving up quite aggressively. We'd love to get his thoughts in a second too. One thing on a super simple level, legendary, that I was thinking is that the Fidenza at 60 ETH with ETH up at 2.6 suddenly is so much more expensive than what it was, right? Like I think we'd got accustomed to just timesing any ETH number by 2, figuring out the dollar value, and that timesing 60 by 2 is 120, whereas right now you're coming out at 157, and it just, you know, it's a really simple point, but one that just shows how leveraged your bet is on ETH when you have that NFT, which doesn't go down when ETH goes up. What do you think about that?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I kind of, realize that in the most degen way when I'm topping up on my online crypto casinos to gamble, and you then see, if you deposit, I don't know, 0.2 ETH, it's suddenly not $400 any longer, but it's more than 500. Again, most degen way to see it. But if you find those collections, and I feel like this is going to be part of our discussion later on when we get into the punks and the squiggle sweeps that do not cause or that don't panic when ETH is pumping and people are selling them off because everyone in there holds them for a longer time horizon, then it's a very nice leveraged bet on ETH. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like ETH NFTs is starting to get expensive again, especially the expensive ones, which again might sound like an obvious thing, but it levers up when the ETH price goes up. Next, what are you thinking? What's catching your eye in terms of this price action at the moment?
That's a good question. Pretty much I'm just being on the sidelines, just like watching from the sides, because I think like we are very, like I would say, in a bull market very well, but it's also like being careful because everything's kind of riding the hype right now. So it's mostly gaming projects catching my eyes, but new ones, right? Not actually old projects, just new projects, I would say so.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're going to get into that loads more a little bit later in the show. So stick around for that, because I saw that chart that Whale shared, and the gains on like a 3-month time frame in some of those new projects are absolutely insane. And if people think ETH NFTs are dead, which some people have suggested, or at least some of the older ones might be like that, that is not going on in Web3 gaming right now. So that is coming up on the show a little bit later. We'd love to throw to Sam just to get just a sense of trying to make sense of this price action, what you're thinking, Sam. Welcome to the stage. What are you thinking?
Man, what's up, dude? I guess there are a few things on my mind. I was kind of in a coffee buzz, high tweet mode yesterday, and a few that I thought were a bit interesting. I mean, obviously, the situation in Mutant Apes and Bored Apes with CBB is a huge situation, and something that I think within NFTs, like the Blur incentive structure is one that has intrigued me the most, almost intellectually, like what's going on there, what are the pros and what are the cons, and I think what we're seeing play out with Mutant Apes is pretty fascinating. The other tweet I put out, which I thought was kind of interesting, is that golden ratio, which is ordinal, kind of, it's a generative art project on ordinals, has flipped every single Art Blocks project that was released in all of 2023.
Wow.
And to me, and if you talk to, I think it's a very nice project, but but there are a lot of great Art Blocks projects released in 2023, like the Harvest and Tricknomatic and a few others that were just really, really cool. And I think that just speaks to how much getting the timing right and the narrative right is so crucial in this space. If this project had launched on Art Blocks as a curated project, it'd be at like a 0.3 ETH floor, but right now it's above 4 ETH, Bitcoin converted. So just all that energy that's pouring into ordinals, because that's the narrative and that's the current wave, and how important it is to catch waves. I think that's kind of interesting. Nice to see the punks and squiggles sweep yesterday. I mean, those are just good old fashioned kind of like Grail digital objects. Squiggles had really quietly been trending very, very low. The floor had gone from like 10 to in the 7s, and it was just, while this whole bull market was happening, like that was one collection that just grinded lower and lower because there was no FOMO and no action. So it was nice to see someone come up and sweep 15, 16. I think it was a Korean buyer who owns a few punks already.
Interesting.
So that's my sense of who that was. So those are a few things on my mind right now, but yeah.
I love it. Really, really interesting stuff. I'm just got this golden ratio collection up for the people watching on the YouTube stream. I think these look awesome. Like aesthetically, Sam, what do you think of them?
Yeah, I think they're cool, and it really kind of it has this like Fibonacci recursion and kind of theme going on. I talked to Derek Edwards, who he was a seed investor in Art Blocks, and he's on the curation board for Art Blocks. He's like, it's cool. He's like, it's not the type of like technology that he was saying would stand out in the ETH ecosystem if it were an art block. Like when you look against the 100 projects that have been released, or whatever. But I just think, I think it's cool art, but really it's like the first kind of big ordinals generative art project, and that I think is the key driver here. But combine that with a very nice project from an artist who is established and has done good work over the past year. Like, I don't want to take anything away from the project, but I've been following Art Blocks. I've been following, GM DAO, or I've just been following a lot of the generative art projects that have come out over the past year, and nothing gets to this price. Like, this market, we are just not in a market that sends generative art this high at this market cap. But there's so much excitement about ordinals right now that just like, if you're an artist, that is the place to be dropping.
Absolutely. I would completely concur with that. And I guess the Shadow Hat mint has kind of suggested that as well. There does seem to be a huge premium attached to these low inscription numbers. So I guess there's a chance that irrespective of the art, if the number is really, really low, at least in this market right now, that's going to attract some type of premium. The only other thing I wanted to add on top, pick out the mutant ape situation. I spoke about this yesterday on Thread Guys Spaces, and I've got this up on the screen as well for people to see what's going on. He asked me, like, are my bags in danger here? So I pulled up the chart to show him, and I've got this up on screen for people to see. Like, and I hadn't actually been looking at the mutant ape loan chart, and I looked at it and I was like, oh God, I'm sorry, man. My condolences go to you, because this chart looks absolutely horrific. Typically, a healthy NFT lending chart would be, a low amount borrowed, a low amount of interest paid. The higher the amount, the higher the amount of interest. And so it's kind of like a straight, not necessarily a straight line, but it's kind of stepped up in a kind of proportional-ish chart, whereas this is like vertical lines with loads and loads of loans already underwater, which means I think a lot of liquidations incoming, and it's down 7% on the day with potentially more. Sam, I wondered if you wanted to come in on that, and maybe where do you think this ends?
I think let's be clear, right? The blend market has never been healthy. And by that, I mean, I shouldn't say never, but over the past few months, like CBB, who is by far the biggest lender, he was earning 80% of blend points, right? So he just built a bot that was better than everybody else's. So his bot was making it so it basically what you couldn't earn points as a lender, and he completely owned that entire market. Now there are maybe one or two other people who are earning points now, but there are three people who are doing all the lending. I mean, CBB at any moment has $5 to $6 million of loans out, and the result is great. He made $10 million in airdrop in season 2. Like, this guy is a king. He's just amazingly good at building bots. And he said, he started with 40 grand a few years ago, and he's now like in the 50 to $80 million range in terms of his bag, and it's all been through building great bots. So this guy is a freaking killer. But the whole ecosystem relies on him. So a week ago, he basically saw that a couple people were wash trading. He thought that wasn't playing by the rules, and he tweeted about it a lot. And then he said, fuck it, I'm going to stop lending on Bored Apes and Mutant Apes, period. I'm not going to lend anything. So all that money got withdrawn. You had a bunch of farmers who've been playing this game of building positions and trying to lure other bidders in and building them on leverage and getting longer and longer. There's one dude who was long 400 mutants, and most of them were at like APYs of like, we're like 400 mutants, most of them on leverage, and some up to like 50, 60, 100% APY. And then CBB pulls all his loans, and no one has enough money to fill that gap.
Exactly.
So, So he pulls and then just all hell breaks loose, right? And that's what we're seeing right now. Now, farmers can work very well together. Like Blur has paid out over $300 million in incentives over the past year in liquid cash, right? That is, so why I think that's important is because you can have 3 or 4 farmers who are like working well, who aren't really going into PvP. They're just making points. Prices are stable and like they're killing it. That's fine. But when someone goes on tilt, like CBB did here, like the whole system can kind of break apart. And that's what we're seeing. Like we're seeing it, like we're not seeing it in prices for pudgies, but like I had a loan out offer for 9.3 ETH on a pudgy. Pudgy hasn't been below 10 in like at least 3 weeks, and I just had it out for 136% APY, and that just got hit. So you're starting to see other projects as well, where like once this community of lenders, there aren't that many of them on Blend, start to lose money, start to like feel like this liquidity crunch, it can extend a little bit to other places. So I don't know. In the past, these things haven't created total disasters because farmers at the end of the day do step up and try to like preserve things. And I think pudgy has a bit more natural demand, but the mutant situation is definitely very, very ugly.
Whew. Not a great outlook there. But thank you so much for that. That's
the
really...
other thing I just throw in is like CBB tweeted yesterday, like I've removed all mutants and Bored Apes loans. And that was just like, that was pure PvP.
Yes.
Like he did it a week ago. He was just like adding insult to injury here by tweeting it so that, that tweet got 1,000 retweets. Everyone's like, holy fuck. Like anybody who's long mutants like, shit, I got to dump. He had already done it. He did it a week ago. This was just him like trying to like put the dagger into Hanwei and to the other guys who are along these things. And he's like, look who's the king, right? I pull my liquidity, you all go down. Like that was what that was.
Yeah, exactly. There's been like a little bit of delight in his voice. Like, although you can't hear his voice, like in the tweet, you can sense this almost delight that he's able to just wreck the market.
Well, all you got to do is look at his feed. Like if you look at his feed going back 10 days, he's for 3 or 4 days, he was literally just saying, Pac-Man, DD, Blur, like we have cheaters here. These guys are washed. Like basically what he was saying is these guys got long tons and tons of DGods. Okay. Now, if you're long DGods, the only way to get out of your position, remember, farmers never want to hold NFTs. The only way you can get out of your position is if other people bid on them. Now, the only way that people bid on them is if they're high volume, because they need to be high volume in order for Blur to give you points. So he got pissed because he thought that like guys like Hanwei were out there trading with themselves a ton of volume just to crank up the points that people got, so more bids would come in that they could dump on. So you're saying this is cheating, and then when things weren't done, he said, okay, fuck that. Like, I'm pulling my loans. And he targeted the wash traders. And I think that's what happened here.
Savage. That's just like all...
Super healthy ecosystem, isn't it?
Yeah, when the whole liquidity providers are like based on just a few people, this political backstabbing, I don't know how you'd describe it, just the games that they're playing with each other can be really destabilizing for the ecosystem. So I think that's what we're seeing here. Really, really fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for that, Sam. It's really, really insightful. Before we get on to just a quick hit on the BTC ETF news, we're not going to do too much on it. And a quick shout to the Shadow Hats. We just want to throw to BSCN Gaming. I believe it's your first time with us. Welcome to the stage. What's your thought on this NFT lending difficulty we're experiencing for the certain ETH NFTs?
Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you. I really appreciate this. It's a great space. You've got a fascinating bunch of guests on here. I wanted to chime in quickly with what our friend NFT Stats was saying. I think it's a really cool observation he made just there. My opinion on that would be, imagine how decimated the NFT space would have been over the last 12 months if individuals were not incentivized to come in and add liquidity and prop up floor prices and integrate and participate in that market. Imagine how insane and absolutely destroyed the entire space would be if these folks were not taking a risk with their hard-earned money to participate in that system.
The two things I'd say to that are, one, we can see that because like CryptoPunks ended up getting no bids in the end. And CryptoPunks, when they had the incentivized bidding, actually tanked. And then when the incentivized bidding stopped because all the liquidity went back to Larva Labs, the prices actually rallied. If you look at World of Women, if you look at V1 Punks, if you look at projects where basically you stop getting liquidity providers when volume goes to zero. And, in season 2, this was even more the case because they only did 1x versus 2x. And when you actually stop getting incentivized bidding, prices start to stabilize. and we've seen it a bunch of times. So it's actually not that hypothetical. We've seen it happen. The other thing is like, hold on one sec. The other thing is like no one's adding liquidity, right? Every time that they actually put a bid in and get hit, they sell as quickly as they can because you need to get your ETH back in order to bid more. And that's how you earn points. So net is liquidity neutral at best. So I think that there's a lot of misperception about how these guys are putting money into the ecosystem. That's actually not what's happening.
Really fascinating stuff. We want to touch on the ETF stuff. So we're going to just throw to Legendary to get a little update on what's going on there. Then a little bit on the big ETH NFT sweeps yesterday, because I think that's super significant before we link that into the gaming run that's been happening just aggressively over the last few months. So Legendary, why don't you give us a little bit of update and link those few points together?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we've been talking so much about the BTC ETF that we have to report some of the stats from the first day, but definitely not make it the main topic for this space today. The main numbers obviously is the trading volume. We spoke about how important trading volume was. It has been reported at 4.5 billion that was traded, with the caveat being that obviously 50% of that was the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust GBTC. Of that volume, majority of the GBTC numbers were sales outflows. Ren Niner even went that far to call it terribly unsuccessful. Eric Bokunas, many others completely disagree with that. It is a tremendously successful start. Volume is what really matters. I think we saw a surprising number of individual transactions, which means that a lot of people were obviously interested in that. I think there were more than 700K transactions. And for me, one of the most interesting figures that I didn't see reported that much on the timeline is the Coinbase OTC trading volume that reached 7.7 billion US dollars yesterday. That is the second highest figure it had ever reached. It is an all-time high since March 21, I think. And if we compare it to the OTC volume, for example, in December, those figures would have been at 1.3 billion US dollars.
Really, really interesting stuff, Legendary. I just had a quick point to make on this one, which is, what do you think of the argument? And I don't know if this is specifically played out as a consequence of what you just described. The fact that the Bitcoin ETF is out, people can, get exposure via that now. What do you think of Coinbase stock? Down 10%, arguably because people, well, this is what I read. People thought, well, now people might not need to hold it to the extent that people saw it as a way to get exposure to crypto. Do we not need Coinbase stock now because we can just get exposure to crypto properly? What do you think about that?
I mean, that argument makes sense if you assume that a lot of people had bought Coinbase exactly as a way to get exposure to the crypto world, quote unquote, via stocks and not having to deal with future ETFs or any other ways to get access to crypto without buying crypto itself. And I mean, yes, obviously a lot of ETF volume goes via Coinbase and they will earn fees by that. But still, if you compare the price war that we're seeing for those ETFs and you see them at 20 base points, and then you see that a single trade on Coinbase is like, 40 to 60 base points. Yes, they make a lot of volume, but their business model is adapting, is changing. If people can trade in and out of BTC way, way cheaper via ETFs, and that might also be a reflection of that.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense there. Next, just a quick one for you on that. Do you do much in the kind of traditional stock-based universe, or are you mostly focused in this more crypto NFTs?
Yeah, my path goes from stocks itself. So like I'm just investing into stocks for like last 6 years plus.
Okay.
So nothing really that I often look at like deeply into. I just keep putting in new good stocks like Nvidia and stuff, long term, and that's pretty much what I do for long term investment in terms of stocks.
Nice. Sounds like a smart way to allocate some capital. Let's get into the ETH NFT conversation. Big sweeps on both punks and squiggles yesterday. Huge amounts. What do we think? Legendary and then next.
On the one hand, super good to see that interest and that massive sweeps in both those collections. On the other hand, I put out that post in the morning where I said, stop looking at the narratives from the old bull market. Focus on what's new and shiny right now and what everyone else is chasing. And I think both those things can be true at the same time. It really depends what you want to do with your capital and how you want to allocate it. Some people are in a position where they want to chase the highest returns, and they're like in a position where they want to make it. And some people have already reached that level and they have already made it, and they are not chasing the next 100x or 1000x or 50x or whatever it is. And they are super happy if they get a bit of a more leveraged bet on ETH by buying punks, by buying squiggles. And if those two or 3x, they are more than happy with that over the next couple of years. So as we speak about the information totem pole, the VC totem pole, and all the other totem pole analogies that we come up in this space, this is the ROI totem pole. You just need to know where you are with your portfolio allocation, and what your like financial goals are. And for some people, that trade makes a lot of sense. For others, they would be like, why would someone buy that many punks when they could buy, well, insert my bags or any other kind of asset that offers more and more return? But I just really think that it depends on your financial situation. But apart from that, very cool to see that.
What do you think about this? I don't know if I heard this in what you're saying or whether I'm thinking it anyway, but I want to throw this to next. What I'm hearing from Legendary, rightly or wrongly, is a barbell strategy. Everyone keeps talking about barbell strategies these days. So I'm just going to make this into a barbell strategy to link it to the gaming stuff as well. On one side of the barbell, you have like these traditionally expensive, solidified, like blue chip NFTs, like squiggles, like punks. And to be honest, I don't know if autoglyphs as well, maybe in that category. And on the other side of the barbell, you skip out all of any other profile picture, insert your bags in between, forget all of those. They're not part of the strategy. On the other side of the barbell, you have all of these gaming NFTs, which is the hottest thing right now. So like those are the two things. You've got the traditional, really strong assets, blue chip assets against which people would be happy to lend a lot of money against consistently, and that the lending market has shown those things. And then your risky bet is on these new gaming things. What do you think of a strategy where you like have those two things as part of your portfolio next?
I agree with Legendary what he said, but like also from a different perspective, when you look at, let's say, barbell strategies, just like if you look at punks, squiggles, and everything, right? It's kind of, let's say, Mona Lisa of NFTs, right? So when you put money into it, like you can feel kind of pretty much safe because punks do not go up and down that much, right? They're pretty much stable coin, let's say, and it gives you some prominent influence in the space. So like if you are one of the people who actually who already made it, as Legendary said, I don't think like you going into risky territory on the other side of barbell is kind of optimal, because you need to be on your toes 24/7, right? But if you're on other side of it, you can pretty much chill and like check it once a month,
Sure.
once every 2 months, and just enjoy the ride. So it's like it depends on the journey and where people are on their journey, I would say, the most.
Next, are you saying that this barbell is not a real barbell? Because on the one side, it's like really, really heavy. The other one is just not the same in any way.
Yeah, I would pretty much say that. Yeah.
Okay. I want to understand this barbell thing better, to be honest. This analogy, maybe I'm screwing it up. We want to get into the more details of the gaming thing in just a second, to deal with one of those sides of the barbell in just a moment. But just before we do that, Jack, your hand is raised. Welcome to the stage with us. What are your thoughts on this barbell? Want to know about the barbell?
Yeah, I think for me, the way I look at this now, as we see these like huge returns, especially when you look at NFTs or shit coins, it's about liquidity of the market. It's also about volume as well. So, buying a punk on a bet that it's going to go up in, 10, 15 ETH in the coming months, as opposed to getting involved in not only these like riskier collections, but also collections where even if technically you're up 10 or 15 ETH, to actually sell them at that price, you're depending on a lot of volume. And how many NFTs have you picked up to get that increase? Like the NFT projects generally, if you're saying you've picked them up at like 0.1, 0.4 ETH, whatever it might be, and now they're at 4 ETH, so you've got to sell 10 or 15 of them. The idea that that's just like going to be an immediate like release where you can just do that, the volume's going to be there to sweep that whole listing off the ground without damaging it's more complicated in a bunch of different ways. I think, if you're just looking for somewhere to park your reef in terms of I want this return, I get why people without that understanding of like the gaming market entirely, why they would feel more comfortable putting it in a punk or in a Premier Squiggle.
Yeah, makes sense. I think those more traditional assets are more traditional for a reason, a bit more battle tested for quite a period of time. So I think that makes sense. Let's talk about that other side of the barbell, though, then. And I think, Legendary, why don't you set this up? I'll change the title of the spaces at the same time. We've got Wales' tweet here about some of the returns that people have been seeing on the gaming side. So why don't you set it up, and then you can throw to next about see what direction we want to take this in.
Yeah, absolutely. Whale, as you said, had that post that looked at the 90-day ROI on basically the gaming projects, new mints, and most of the narratives from the last bull market. And if you look at the projects that have the highest ROI, you have top of the board the Nexian Gems Skyborn, the premier NFT in the Skyborn ecosystem with almost 5,000% ROI. You have Vanguards in the Seed World ecosystem with 1.1K, Mokaverse doing a 5x, Mitaria a 4.5x, and so on and so on. And then if you look at the other side, you see other deeds and Nakamigos being down 21 to 24%, Got the Cat Gang being down 56%, Nouns being down 73%, O'Peppins being down 13%, the same amount as D-Gods. And then you have the new mints like the Lead Worlds that are did 9,600%, Overworld did an 11x, Matrix, Cuckoo did a 5x, AOF first did a 4x, and so on. So I think this is basically that tension that we touched a bit on before when we spoke about that that squiggle and punk sweep, and seeing how those gaming NFTs are doing. And to me, it was super interesting to also see that the token meta that comes with gaming, everyone is hyped for games because they expect an airdrop. They expect a token to launch and they expect that to pump. And now seeing that the overall market is doing quite well and ETH is up, that kind of fuels this narrative even more. So I think that a lot of those returns that we are seeing are tied to the token expectations. I don't think, and this is where I'm curious to hear more from you next as well, I don't think that all of those games can be successful. I don't even think that we have a big enough audience and player base so that we can play collectively as Web3 20 to 30 games at a time, because there's just not enough people here. So I do think, as much as I love to see this trend, and as much as I'm obviously also like benefiting and profiting from it by trading it, I do think that we are in a bubble that's growing faster and faster. What are your thoughts on that thesis next?
Yeah, I will start from side of saying that gaming is not the meta, right? Gaming has the most clear use for ownership and open trade, right? Everyone, if you are in gaming, you very well know that trading is the big part of gaming, and there's an omni-chain that does more volume, that did more volume than Polygon, ETH, and Solana at some point, right? So it has very good use cases, especially when you pair it to NFTs, having a proof of ownership and you are only one able to use it in a game, and if you get banned, as example, right, you don't lose everything. Like in Web 2, traditionally people get banned and lose like millions in their even like in their wallets, right, and they can never return that. With NFTs you can change that, right? No, like even if you get banned, no one can take that, you still have it in your wallet. But in terms of a bubble, I'm gonna be very honest, I think we are in a huge bubble, and I said this year will be very fun, very exciting, but also a lot of people, and I say 90% of people will get burned,
Ooh.
because there's a lot of generic games that are pretty much the same, just different names, right? Currently, no one is really innovating, right? And Web2 traditional gamers, if you show them what you have right now, no one would even try it out. And just as a perspective, I'm gonna put this info out. Just on the Steam itself, last year, there's 45 games, around 45 games per day. So every 24 hours,
Wow.
there's 45 new games. There's 30 million of players, and there's
Wow.
not enough players in Web 2 to play those games. How many good titles are out with 30 million? So
Mm.
what does make us think that currently, let's say 15,000 people on average, and we have like probably now hundreds of games out, those games will succeed? So it's like even a question if one or two of those will hit, right? That's the big thing, right? So also the big issue is traditional Web2 games that are coming in the space, that you see people from all of these big brands, right, companies building. It's mostly, let's say they are mostly finished games, like 80-90% finished, and I think those games will burn people even more, because they just really don't care about Web3, right? They're just coming into it, testing the field, and just leaving out, right? For them, that's a failed project. In Web2, they can just shrug that out, and that's just one of the games that they tried, right? But in Web3, that's a big issue, because you have communities and everything else. So
Mm.
yeah, overall, this year will be really tough, like about being in a bubble, definitely, and like pinpointing what is good and what is not. I think no one can really know that. I would probably just focus on, it's really even that hard, right? Like all the funding and everything also is like, in the end, it matters, but it also doesn't mean a lot, because in Web2, even games with 120 million like Battlefield 5 failed, right? So
Mm.
big bubble.
Yeah, interesting you say that. Kind of a reasonable warning. I think a few people have been going in that direction, suggesting what you've just said. It does feel a little bit unsustainable, and I love the Web 2 example that you gave, with how many games exist in Web 2, how many new ones are coming to market, and even there, where there's millions more active players, there's still not enough players to play all of those games. Key question I wanted to ask for you, as someone who's more in depth in this ecosystem and has a good eye for spotting good things and bad things. You mentioned that there are lots of, I don't know if you said copycat, but then maybe that was my reading of it. There's lots of things at the moment which just seem very, very similar. Maybe they're
Yeah.
taking some type of template and just reproducing it, and suddenly that's also raises huge amounts of money.
Yes.
What should people be looking for to recognize, like, hang on a second, this is just like a copy of that, or this is low effort, or this is, because for the people who maybe are not as into the gaming side, maybe they don't know. What's your, like, on your list of things, like, this is how I identify those things?
Yeah, that's a difficult question, but also a very good question. I would just say it's starting from the basics, and what I mean from the basics is who made their engine, like who made the root of the game, right? If they're like let's say they're using Unreal Engine 5, that's totally fine, because you are making the game in it, right? But there are games out there using Lyra engine, example, and that's an engine, as example, that is just a showcase how to make a base of the game. And a lot of games currently in Web3, I'm going to say, they're using that exact prototype and just pasted their names on top and just changed the look of skins. And that's their game in Web3, which is really bad, right? And it's multiple of games. Like you can generally see, if you just type that name and compare to some games, you can generally see it's the same. Like there's no difference. So what I would look for is generally going back in the past and looking their success, right? What did they make, right? I think that's the most important thing. And how many games failed? Because every single developer from Web 2 will have games failed under them, which is not a big issue, right? Again, like that doesn't really matter. Just looking what type of games succeeded on their side. And when they are creating a games in Web 3, were they the one creating the base of the game, or did they take it for someone else and put their slap their name on it, right? And the second thing would be how much funding they have, right? Because 10, 20, 30 million is not a lot, to be honest. Like if someone is making MMORPG shooter games,
Mm.
those we have the most type of games like this in the space currently. Those are two most generous in the space currently, and they're the most expensive ones. So with 20 million, you cannot really make any of those. You need 100 plus of millions, right? 100 plus million to make a good MMORPG game, right? And this third thing would be setting the expectations from their side. If they tell you that game will be made in a year or two, I'm sorry, but that's impossible. Like it can be a prototype, it can be a beta demo of a game, right? You just testing and trialing. But if you want real expectations of a game, it's like long journey. It's like 4+4, I would even say 5+ years for any of those games, right? So it takes a
Interesting.
long time to make a game. So those are just some points, but
Sure.
also just experience from the from the founder and everyone else, like on what did they work on and what exact position did they work on. It doesn't really matter in a company if they work for Tencent Games or Riot Games, but what is the exact position of those people, right? Did
That's
they
a good
were
point.
low in the company or
Mm.
were they high in the company? What are they were working on exactly? So I think that's my biggest thing that I search for, because just saying that you work somewhere doesn't really mean anything. It just depends on your position. So yeah.
Love it. A lot of good things there. Shout out to Moritz or aka Duck in the comments saying you got to drop some names next. But we're gonna ask you. We're gonna come back to you to drop some names. Maybe both on the negative side, if you don't want to do that, at least on the positive side, like looking forward that you're looking forward to in the kind of as 2024 rolls out. But before we do that, Legendary, just want to come to you for some reflections. And just for everyone listening, the last 10 minutes of the space, this is what we'll do. Legendary is going to have some reflections there. We're going to get to the Web3 news to get you up to speed with what else has been happening in the space. And then we're going to try to get to some hands, but we are running out of time, so we might not be able to get to all of you. And then we want to do some future looking stuff with Next, where he will, I think, as the audience requires, drop some names. So Legendary, any reflections on what Next has been saying so far?
Yeah, I absolutely love the point on having a look at the engine, on having a look at the base of the game and how it's being built. As someone who loved to play gacha games, hero collector games on mobile, which is an incredibly revenue strong but also toxic industry. You've seen it with those mobile gaming studios that they just copied a successful game, reskinned it, sometimes often copied successful game base, stole IP from someone else, mashed that together, had a game promoted that heavily in the App Store, made a couple $2 million in in-app purchases over a couple months, and then just disappeared and rinsed and then rinse and repeat with the next franchise. So if you have that greed already in like traditional mobile gaming, why wouldn't it be different? Why would it be different in Web3? And it's really, really important to have a look at who the good actors are, who the bad actors are, and also the other point that Next has made on budgets is very important. Like whenever the topic comes up, I'm reminded of the post that Loopify made at some point last year, where he asked his audience what they are thinking, how much it takes to build a AAA RPG, and most estimates have been around like 20 mil, 30 mil, 40 mil maybe, and a lot of people also thought you could do that, within 1 to 2 years. But if you actually have a look at those costs, they can be well above 200 mil as well. And as Next said, go on for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, sometimes even longer. If you look at some of the very successful franchises. So I found those 2 points very, very good and helpful.
Awesome stuff. As we said, we want to get into the Web3 roundup to get you up to speed with what else is going on. Then we want to drop some names. We're going to try to get to the rest of the hands as well, but we don't have that long left. It's been a great show so far. Let's close it well. First, number one, as always, is from the snapshot pinned up top. Number one, ARK CEO Kathy Wood gives the base case for Bitcoin as $600,000 and bull case as $1.5 million by 2030. Absolutely love to hear that. Number two, USDC issuer Circle files for IPO at valued at 9 billion. That's pretty significant. Vanguard bans all Bitcoin ETFs from their platform. I think that's a bit of a dramatic headline. It's just not able to trade there at the moment. And number four, CryptoPunks introduced new brand hub, an archive, and living source for project info and initiatives. And more on the creator side, Taproot Wizards tweet about quantum cats. Not only have they not brought out the actual Taproot Wizards yet, but now they're talking about cats as well. So more to be excited about on the ordinal side. Crypto investigator Zach XBT receives $500,000 grant from Optimism. Got to be aware of these Optimism grants that go out. They're called retro grants to people who've just been doing good stuff. Got to be aware of that if you're a serious participant in this space. And finally, L2 Manta passes 900 million TVL legendary. Like we said, it was crazy when Blast went past 1 billion. Manta just randomly going past 900. Well, not randomly, just absolute awesome, powerful amounts of liquidity in the market ready to be thrown around wherever necessary. That's what else has been going on around the space in the last 24 hours. Bringing it back to the gaming conversation, let's throw to Kusho first, because we haven't heard from you yet. And then we'll try to get to the others as well in just a second. And then we're going to get to the names that we want to hear. Kusho first, welcome to the stage with us, my friend. What are your thoughts?
GM, can you guys hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so the thing I wanted to say is the metrics to determine what a successful game is completely different from every kind of Web3 protocol that we have out there. So, like on average, you have a DeFi protocol, and what is the take on average for that to be quote unquote successful would be like 1,000 users, 10,000 users. But for a game, it's completely different. For games, you need to have like 1 million users, 10 million players. Like top games have millions upon millions of players playing them. And this is something that we need to consider. I don't think we have up to 10 million people in the entire Web3 space, to be honest. But at the same time, it's like the reason this is such a big deal, especially from what Next said, is like when you look at a game that's being developed and a good game at that, it's going to cost millions upon millions of dollars.
For sure.
And we just do not have that crowd of people who are pulling in those amounts of money into the Web3 gaming sector, right?
Mm.
And for me, that's like a reflection of the fact that the effort that it then takes for somebody to replicate that and then create a copycat game that's not really anything special is a lot less and is a lot more lucrative on average. So it's much easier to produce a game that's like a cheap knockoff and then to put it out there. The other
For sure.
thing is like low effort for games in general is not low effort for everything else. So low effort on gaming is like, okay, you build a game, you design characters, and that's still quite a bit of effort, even if it is very, very low effort compared to other games. And then looking at that, it's like, yo, it's very hard for a person who isn't very versed with games to tell what a low effort game is because we don't really understand the mechanics of how proper games are built or how knockoff games are built, so to speak.
Very, very fair points there. I think that's all valid. Want to throw to BSCN Gaming one more time. Has to be a quick one, my friend, because we want to close. We're going to run a few minutes over. We want to hear the names still from Next. But what are your thoughts here?
Oh man, you guys got me on a tilt here. Kusho, Next, Legendary, you guys raised some absolutely amazing points. We can talk volumes on this. I wish we could. I'll be quick though. This space has been flush with a lot of money for the last 18 months. So if you look at some of the reports by DAP Radar, there's been some $4 billion of liquidity and money that had been injected into the gaming space over the last 18 months. And we're now seeing some of that materialize. So these are communities that have been building and compounding, and they've brought that narrative up with them. Outside of that, there's a lot of other conversations, but I'll just leave it at that. What we're seeing now is just a result of that capital that was injected quite a while ago.
I love it. Thanks so much for the kind of succinct, to the point tweet, coming up with the facts and figures to back it up. But we love that as well. Because that was so succinct, Jack, I want to give you a chance, a quick one before we hit to next, to kind of conclude.
Yeah, thanks, B-Check. And you know me, always succinct with my points.
Succinct, remember.
So, yeah, look, for me, a really quick point just on the tokenomics. I think the one thing about games and the reason that we're seeing such huge sort of sales and the way they work is purely for the fact that at least there is an understanding of how that will work in terms of there's going to be something for the token to be used. So when you look at a game and you're like, okay, they will launch a token, it isn't just a speculative token based on memeability. There is potential for infrastructure on why that thing will be used, which will drive the price, hopefully, if it's successful. So I think that's why we're seeing such a huge meta narrative in that fact, is due to the fact that there's actual use case for it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's still difficult to design the economy, but at least there's a universe in which to spend the coin, right? Whereas for a lot of other projects, like we were talking about the Azuki one recently, it's like, well, okay, maybe this token could power anime, but like, how does that actually work? Like, where's the world in which you can spend? So yeah, I take that point. It's still very difficult, still exceptionally difficult to design a new money, but I understand where you're coming from there. Let's move towards the end. We wanted to conclude with next kind of thinking forward, what you're looking at, what you like. Might get a few shout outs of some projects that you're thinking about at the moment. What are your thoughts, my friend?
I'm just gonna say firstly that the game doesn't really need to be flashy. I think people can learn from that. Little company in Web2, $10 game, BattleBit $10 game. They're all BattleBit, for example, was spin-off of Battlefield 5. Just two devs, two people just making a pixelated Minecraft type of game, shooter game like Battlefield, and it was highly successful. 20 million of players at the time. So, like, it doesn't really matter. It can be a purely meme game and it can very well work. It's just being unique and throwing a new spin can work very well. But the game that I'm anticipated the most, I'm gonna start with that. Definitely Shrapnel.
Ooh,
Totally unique shooter game. Like there's no type of other shooter in the space currently that is like extraction shooter, like Escape from Tarkov style. I think it can do very well, just dependent on this month. I think they will release their playtest, so we will see. Excited about that, but not having high expectations. Wildcard is the next one, type of MOBA game. Definitely amazing in my books. S tier game. It's upcoming release. Those two. Currently released, Baby Games. Card game, amazing game. Parallel is also amazing game. Upcoming still the Treeverse MMO, which I'm highly looking forward to, from Loopify, as we all know.
interesting.
Play Off the Grid, also a big shooter, 100+ million in funding, also already banned out, and people played it streaming on Twitch. So just a play test from big streamers, so that's a plus. Fableborn, shout out to Play Cypher. I played it on the phone. Actually, one of my top mobile games right now that I played in Web3. Generally can say kind of all positives from me.
Sounds great.
Charbon game.
You could keep going.
Yeah.
We said we want to drop some names.
Yeah.
There's a lot of names.
Charbon game, positive. That's TCG kind of game. I still don't play it, but from looks of it and friends playing it, it's very unique. I think it can do very well. And I think those are my kind of top games that come from top of my mind that I personally like. I want to try this, right? So those are my games. But now we go to juicy part, what everyone wants. I don't intend any harm to anyone, but I'm just gonna be kind of honest. I'm gonna go like this: 99% of the current shooters that you are seeing out are generic copy pasted games. So I think I don't need to drop names. I can just say that. So that can point out basically kind of everything, right? Except the names that I showed in the plus, right? So those are games on Lyra. So you guys can all type Lyra on the YouTube. Open that. Open one gameplay, and that's all you need to know.
Love it.
And I think shooters are probably the most prominent currently in the space, right? And this second thing I would say are MMORPGs that have AAA game in the name. I would just say, please, people, do not fall for that. AAA games take 6-7 years, hundreds of plus of millions, as I said, for MMORPG. And if they only show you no gameplay, no trailer, just their fancy UI made UX characters, trust me, they're spending money, wasting money on just showing you the characters. They are not doing anything. So
Love it.
that's pretty much it. I think people can take a lot from that, especially on shooter games. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for dropping all of that information. I think clearly, very, very clearly, you know what you're talking about. So if you're not on that list, commiserations to you. If you're on the list, shout out to she. Really, really interesting stuff to learn about that. Legendary, a quick reflection from you as we close out, maybe a reflection on the list.
I love the list. Was worried about my bags being mentioned in the second part of the list. No, absolutely loved our gaming discussion on this space today.
Absolutely love it. Guys, we've run over time. We hope you've had a good show with us. This has been our final episode of the week. As a reminder, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT. Next, we're so grateful for you coming on the show and joining us today. Clearly, exceptionally knowledgeable about the gaming space. If anyone wants to follow along or get to know you a bit more, what can they do to follow you in the best place?
Basically, just my Twitter. I'm just posting my thoughts. I post reviews about the games, and that's pretty much it. And I do streams on Twitch so often, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for having me once again. It was pretty fun.
Love it, man. Thank you so much for joining us. Guys, that is our final show of the week. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you back on Monday. Bye-bye.